I'm aware of at least one person, but I imagine there may be others. Is there anyone in this room who has served in the United States military? Can you please stand up if you served in the United States military? Can you recognize this person? So as you may have seen in the materials that we sent out in advance, the purpose of this conversation is to really talk about innovation in education. And we're going to do this in a two-part structure that you can get a sense for the program that was left at your seat. We'll begin with a one-on-one conversation with David Robinson. We'll take a very brief break, 5 minutes, which probably needs 10. And then we'll come back and we'll have a set of panelists. And what we really want to do here is we want to push through some of the conventions about what schooling is supposed to look like and think critically about what places like Notre Dame and others can really do to better serve our schools, our school kids, and our communities. So let's begin with our first speaker here. So rarely do I have, or really have an opportunity to say that our speaker needs no introduction, I expect. This is a tremendous honor for me in many, many ways. David has been recognized in many, many facets of his life. He is a true pioneer and an innovator, so I won't take time to read his biography. First, and perhaps most importantly, I really do want to say on behalf of everybody from Notre Dame, everybody here and beyond, you honor us with your presence, so thank you so very, very much. We're really grateful. So let me start with this question. What drew you into the field of education? So you obviously could have done many things following your storied career in the NBA. You could have invested your time outside the philanthropic sector, or even if you had done so philanthropically, there are many things you could have done. Why education?
Well, basically because my mom and dad made me. I wish there were a better answer than that. My mother has always been a proponent of education. When I was a kid, it was never even an option that I wasn't going to college. And I think with my mother grew up in the South in Columbia, South Carolina. My dad grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas in the 50s. And so, actually my father had the opportunity to be one of the Little Rock Nine to go to Central. He was going to Horace Mann at the time. And they asked him, would you go do this? And he said, no. He said, no, I'm going back to my high school. So he went back to his high school. And then you guys know that story, in 1957. Only one of those guys ended up graduating from that high school. One of the girls that went there ended up getting acid thrown on her. The governor, the next year in 1958, decided that he was going to cancel all schools so he could push the legislation to make sure that the schools wouldn't be integrated. And so I grew up around my mom and dad who dealt with that stuff. And so I felt a very strong responsibility to push things further. I know my grandfather kind of really committed his whole life, taught my dad and all of his siblings how to play piano music. They were all incredible musicians, really talented people. And each generation, it was our responsibility to push things forward and be better and have more opportunities. And so here we are a couple generations later, and virtually I've had no limitations to what I could do. And unfortunately, that's not the case for everybody. But that's been where my passion is, to open the doors and open the opportunities. We have so much in these kids, so much potential that we're not tapping into. And we see this as a nation. Educationally, we're falling behind other nations. We're not tapping into our potential. And so my passion has been to motivate kids and families and give them opportunities and give them routes to success. And not just financial success, but obviously just fulfilling their talents and their abilities.
So you conclude a great career with the Spurs, which, by the way, we discussed this earlier. I believe, or at least someone has mentioned to me here, that this space is where a younger, but maybe just as physically fit David Robinson signed his first contract with the San Antonio Spurs, which someone said that's a great sign of closure. I won't say closure, I'll just say
transition.
Yeah, transition. So, you finish your career and you decide to invest to really plant roots here in San Antonio. Again, you could have done it in many, many places. So can you talk a little bit about the education sector here in this city? What are the greatest challenges that you see here in the city? What are the greatest signs of hope that you see in the city?
Well, the number one sign of hope is that things are changing. When I first got here, obviously, Texas and, San Antonio in particular was one of the lower performing areas in the country. And we really worked hard to change that. In the last couple of years here, we brought in several high performing charters, Basis, Great Hearts, KIPP has grown. KIPP's for a long time, we had 2 schools here. Now they're growing tremendously. IDEA, we became IDEA's first school here, and now we have 15 schools and 5,500 students here. Those of you who don't know the story about IDEA, but it started down in the Rio Grande Valley by Tom Torkelson, and it's now we have 30,000 students across the state of Texas in 51 schools, growing every year. We hope to have 20 schools by 2017, by next year, by the end of next year. So ambitious, and we're going to keep pushing. And for the last 10 years, we've had, every one of our students have been accepted to a college, and that's been a phenomenal deal. I went back to graduation here in June, down in the Rio Grande Valley to San Juan, and you drive through this neighborhood of where these families live, and in these areas they may not have all the electricity and all the things to their house, but these kids come to this high school. I watched 500 kids walk across the stage. Every single one of them held up their banners of what college they were going to. And you see how transformational this is for those families. Everybody's in their Sunday best and they're just celebrating, they're partying because they know this means something for the family. And so it's very emotional when you get down there and you see this happening. And we want to make that happen, to a larger extent.
So can you talk for a moment about Carver specifically? And I guess maybe let's go back to the beginning. So what were the kind of the root beliefs that led you to launch this effort with Carver? And then I guess a kind of an attendant question would be, why do you think these families choose Carver over the other options that they may have?
Well, that's a great question. When I came out of the academy, I was doing some things with the Police Athletic League in the DC, Maryland, North Virginia area. And we visited about 25 high schools with the Police Athletic League, and the message was say no to drugs. So I go into these high schools and in the auditoriums, and I talk to the kids and, say, you guys, I know that, in the DC area now, drugs is a big deal, mayor just got arrested for drugs. Okay, so, say no to drugs. And afterwards, the kids would come down to me. This is before I had signed with my team. I was getting ready to go play in the NBA, and these kids came down and they wanted to talk, and they said, man, that's easy for you to say. You get ready to go and play in the NBA. Now, my life is different. If I sell drugs, I can make, such and such money. One kid was telling me, I got a trunk of cash in my car. A trunk full of cash, and he said, I can make such and such money, selling drugs, and I was just floored, and by what he was telling me, and I thought, what a tough decision that is. I mean, these kids are faced with real life decisions, and I felt like I was not giving them enough by just going out and spending a few minutes with them and telling them to say no to drugs. So when I got back, I was praying. I got back here and I was praying. I said, Lord, I want to really help these kids. And I really felt like the Lord was telling me, he said, you can talk to people till you're blue in the face. It won't make any difference. He said, but plant the seeds and I'll make them grow. And so for me, that was such a great encouragement. And I said, well, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna plant seeds. I'm gonna get these kids interested in education, start planting seeds here in San Antonio, and that's what really started me to start the Carver Academy. I'm gonna start these kids at 4 and 5 years old, and I'm gonna start teaching them how to study, how to prepare themselves for the highest level of academics, get them thinking about college at an early age. And so we were doing it on the private school level because I felt like faith was an important aspect of that growth. I mean, you can be smart, but if you don't know why you're here, if you don't know why you're doing the right things, it's so easy to get confused. I mean, I came to the NBA and I thought, I've been raised in a good family and I've got good morals and all this kind of stuff. But within 2 years, my whole life had changed. Everything I thought I believed started to change. I mean, you're running around and there's all the groupies and everything, and you're like, man, I can't trust any of these girls. Like 2 years ago, I was thinking, I just want to find one girl, get married, this will be so great, this is going to be wonderful. Then 2 years later, I'm looking around like, oh no. Get married? No. I mean, I looked around and I said, there's no marriages that I see that I want my marriage to be like. There's just no great examples. Like, so do I want to be with somebody for 20 years and then just live in the same house with them? I don't want to do that. And so so you think you have these great principles and foundations, but everything changes. Like, we go to, like I said before, we used to go to Hawaii in the summertime, and the current was so strong. The guys were teaching me how to surf. And they were saying, be careful of the rip tides and the currents. He said, when you get out on the board, you see that palm tree right there? Stay lined up with this palm tree. And then 2 minutes later, you're down the beach and you got to paddle back over, and the current's always taking you somewhere. It's taking you out. And that's how the world is. There's just this current. It's constantly pulling you out. And then before you know it, you look up and you're way farther than you thought you were supposed to be. And so, this is what we at Carver, we try to teach these kids. That's the way the world is. You have to be grounded. You have to really understand it. So that's why we felt like faith was such a key component to saying, hey, this is who you are. There's no mistake, right? You were uniquely created. There's no mistake. And you have to take the gifts that you've been given and make the most of them. And just like George Washington Carver, which it's named after Carver, he said, start where you are, use what you have, make something of it, and never be satisfied. And so that's what we taught these kids. You have a calling. There's a reason that you're here. And you've got to find that reason. You've got to find all the things that fit together in your life. Why are you here? What's your background? What are your talents? All these things will come together to show you where you're supposed to go. And it's your job to not waste it. So that was really my drive to get these kids on the right path after seeing so many of these kids. They had tough decisions. It's not, it's not easy. They thought that was low-hanging fruit, and now I'm telling these kids, hey, the low-hanging fruit is getting your education. There's people out all over the place looking for you to try to help you. And so they could believe me because they know I put my money on the line. I said, I'm putting my money down to try to help you, and I'm going to bring as many people as I know that will do the same for you.
So you've mentioned the faith dimension a few times, and I'm curious, you started Carver as a faith-based school. It's transitioned to a charter model through IDEA.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, both what motivated that and then your experience of it with regards to the kind of faith values dimension that you just spoke to?
Well, I thought it was a great foundation, and I think early on, a lot of the families really came to Carver because of that faith-based part of the school, and they wanted a safe environment for their kids, and they wanted an accelerated environment. And it was a tough decision for us to change to the charter method because for us, we felt like prayer was so important, and we didn't want to give up. We started every day with chapel, so the kids come in, and we taught them the 55 essentials. Carver schools always say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, always makes eye contact with you. And then we would, in our 6 pillars, they had to learn scriptures. So with integrity, the man of integrity walks securely, Proverbs 10 and 9. And so they had to memorize the scriptures that went along with integrity and discipline and service. And so for us, that was an important component. But thinking about how do we expand this? We have 120 kids in this school, and there's 120 million kids that need it. So how do we grow this? And I didn't see a path financially for us to be able to either raise the money or duplicate what we had at Carver in a cost-efficient way. I mean, it was costing us $19,000 a child to educate these kids and to get them prepared. And that's not reasonable. You can't duplicate that. That can't be replicated. And so we started talking to some of the high-performing charter schools that were doing a great job of putting kids into college and still held some value proposition. And so we interviewed a few groups, and IDEA was the one we selected because we loved the work that they were doing down there, and it was still very values-based. So we had raised some endowment monies, and we took the endowment monies aside to support the spiritual aspects of outside of the school day. And so IDEA ran the school, and so we started with them, like I said, 5 years ago, and now we've grown it to 15 schools.
It's an incredible story. I'm curious, so one of the things we often talk about in ACE is the unique and essential role of the school leader, right? There's no such thing as a great school with a weak school leader. And I'm thinking about your own experiences. If I can say so, I'm thinking about your experience at the academy, on the Olympic team, the Spurs. You've been coached by some just incredible people. So when you think about a school leader at Carver, what do you look for? What were the things that you would say, our school leader has to have these dispositions and attributes?
It has to be dynamic and impassioned. I think, that's the thing. People follow other people. I don't care what business you're in fundraising. People give money to people. They don't give money to causes as much as they do to the people in those causes. So for me, it's the same thing, and I've always talked to our teachers about that. You're the first line, you're the example, right? They're following you, they're looking for leadership, right? You can't go to television and, we don't know those guys on TV, they're not role models. A lot of times you're in a big church, you don't even know the pastor. It's like, you can follow the people that you know are walking. I can't fool my wife, right? So like, she's there every day. So and my children, they see it all. So I have to be that first line for them. I have to be someone that they can look up to and they can follow, and they can say, well, Dad, I've watched you for 20 years, and I want to do what you've done. And so, that's what I try to tell our teachers, because they really are that first line for them. And so, trying to get one by one to get our staff to understand that we've done a good job of growing a lot of our school leaders up through our system.
Really?
Yeah, so and that's really mostly IDEA. Tom and Joanne Gama do a phenomenal job of that. So we've been very fortunate, but when you grow as fast as we're growing, it's difficult to find staff and teachers and make sure that everyone knows what they're doing and how to run the school with that kind of passion, but we've managed to do it.
There's nothing more important than people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to make sure we have enough time for conversation and questions with David, so please let me open the floor, and who's got some questions? Please.
How big of a role is the science, technology, engineering, and math program in your schools?
No, that's a great question. I think it's a priority for us. We've just expanded our robotics program, and obviously for us, we want to get the kids taking, by the time they graduate high school, on average, our kids will take between 10 and 12 AP courses. So science and technology also obviously falls into that a great deal, but we want to get these kids introduced to the most advanced information that they can before they graduate. So I don't know that I'd say we have a specific focus on science, technology, engineering. Certainly not engineering, but it's a good balance. And like I said, they take a lot of AP courses, so they're prepared by the time they get to college. They're very, very prepared.
Please.
What is your foundation focusing on now?
Oh, that's a great question. For the last several years now, the David Robinson Foundation, we've been through a few different iterations. We started off with the I Have a Dream Foundation, and that was a foundation that was started by Eugene Lang out of New York, and basically it was a promise to fifth graders who wanted to go to college. They put money aside, and they said, we're going to guarantee that we have opportunities for you when you get to college age. And so we partnered with them and started back here in San Antonio with a fifth grade class. We had 94 kids, and about 20 of those kids ended up going to college. And so that was kind of the first part of it. Then we started focusing on Carver, and then now since Carver is a charter school, and we're raising money for the buildings, but we're not raising money for operations anymore. We get in about 80% of what the public schools get for operations, but we managed to do the work with the 80% of the funding. So now we have some flexibility to kind of focus on some other things, but we've stayed in the education field. Through my company now, Admiral Capital, we're doing a lot of education and mentor-based programs. So in Houston, for example, we started the Admiral Hospitality Scholars, which is tied to my Admiral Capital Group. We bought a Hilton hotel. Hilton Global came into Houston. We sat down with them, we sat down with the University of Houston, and Hilton Global said, well, we want to increase diversity in our hotels. How do we do this? And I said, well, I'm in education, so let's start getting these kids understanding the opportunities that are available in the hospitality field. And so we partnered up with the hotels, and we said, let's once a month send a group of kids to the hotel, let them be mentored by the leaders at the hotel, whether they're in food and beverage or they're in front office, security, whatever. So they'll spend time with those guys, and then during the summer they'll spend 5 days at the University of Houston at the Hilton Hospitality School and start, they'll build restaurants, they'll do all kinds of things for 5 days, and then we have special trips for these kids. So this year we took them to the Houston Astros ball game, and we took them back behind the scenes, and the chefs cooked them meals and showed them back of house operations. They learned, what jobs were available. We took them down to the cruise ships down at the port and showed them back of house operations at the cruise ships. So all these inner city kids are coming out and they're saying, wow, we didn't know you could do all of this stuff. This is great. Like, we thought, starting a restaurant or something, but man, there's a lot of great jobs out there. We can travel all over the world, and so we take 25 kids a year, and when they graduate, we give them scholarships to the University of Houston in the hospitality school. So if they're interested in the hospitality field, we give them a clear path to do it. And so, we're focusing on a lot of those type of programs and growing those opportunities now. We have partnerships with some tech companies, and I want kids to get into tech. I want kids to get into finance. So I'm trying to build programs where I can make a clear path for these kids, where they can see a way to get into some of these industries.
Please, Colleen.
So I think it's really intriguing, the transformation from a religious school, private school, to a charter school.
Mm-hmm.
And there are schools we know that are considering that and really feel strongly that that sort of chapel and the body, mind, spirit is so critically important, especially to low-income kids. And so how have you managed, there's a lot of talk about bookending or using the private monies to maintain an optional faith-based component.
Yeah.
Have you been able to maintain that at all as you convert to charter?
And the answer to that is no, I have not been able to. I have not found the right programs that I think wrap around the school day well enough. I've interviewed several programs that are wraparound school programs, but they haven't proven to me that they have a good enough curriculum and good enough results yet. I mean, I need to see a track record before I can buy into it fully. But, there's a balance there. It's when you have to decide, what is your role as a school, right? And us, we had to decide, is it more important for us to preach the gospel to them or open the doors for them? So when we started Carver, I said, look, we are here, and I told my staff this, I said, we're here to support these families, right? We're not here to replace the parents. We're here to support them and encourage them, and from a faith-based point, give them another place to come and do chapel and make sure that they're focused. And so going forward, I said, what I want to do more than anything is impact more kids. So I felt like it was a fair trade-off to be able to say, I can grow this thing at a tremendous rate and impact 10 times more kids, 100 times more kids, and then I can take the money and put it aside and then find other programs spiritually that can help these families. So there's always that balance, right? So what are you doing? If you're there for ministry, that's more, kind of church. And I think when you're serving the Lord, you have to be open to, you can't think everything is yours, right? You can't think it's all about you. Like Carver, like everybody associated everything with Carver with me, and I keep telling everybody, this is not about me. This is about these kids. This is about the opportunities and opening these doors. So it's not so important what I think. what's important is opening and giving these opportunities. So I had to be able to back away and say, what's best for this program? What's best for how do we impact more kids? And so I said, look, sure, I'd love to have chapel for them every day. I'd love to be able to go in there and encourage them and have them memorize Bible scriptures and all this sort of stuff. But, you know, if this is the way we can grow it and we can affect more kids, I think it's worth that trade-off. And so that's what we did.
Time for one more question. Yeah, John.
David, have you any sense of what the impact of the schools has been on other sectors of education, especially public schools and districts, or successes you're having driving change in other sectors as well?
Yeah, well, no question, it's having its impact. Now, I mean, obviously, you got to get to a reasonable scale before it makes a difference. But when you start talking about, you know, 50,000 kids, you're talking about a pretty good-sized school district. And if you're sending every single one of your kids to college, that makes everybody else, all the public schools, sit around and have to say, okay, look, maybe we need to reevaluate what we're doing. Maybe we need to, you know, figure out if we can learn something from each other. And I think San Antonio has been a very good place for that, especially in these last couple of years with all these charter schools coming in. I think the public schools have been amazing. There's been great dialogue. I think that the schools have worked together. I mean, unlike in Austin, I think Austin's had their challenges. And for various reasons, they've politicized a lot of the issues between the charter schools and the public schools. But they're both there to do the same thing, you know, but it boils down to money, right? You see a kid leaving your school, you think there's dollar signs leaving my school. So I think the dialogue has to stay open, and we have to get to charter schools I don't think are the answer, but I think they certainly are part of the answer. They give us some flexibility to do things differently, to try to be more efficient, to try to be more effective. There are some bad charter schools. There are some charter schools that are trying things that aren't necessarily as effective. Well, you know, well then obviously we need to, you know, figure that out and move forward. But certainly I think we're part of the solution. I think we do a lot of things right, and hopefully that can be something that public schools can really learn from, and maybe we can educate these kids for, you know, less than we do, and we can do a better job educating these kids for what we're doing. So yes, I think we're challenging public schools to a certain extent, in a good way, but I think we need to continue to build it to a scale that can really put pressure on the public schools to make those kind of changes that they need to make. You know, when you're too small, you just don't have that voice. But I think we're getting there. We're doing a phenomenal job of growing, and our results are ridiculous. So yes, I think it's starting to cross that border of making a bigger difference, which is what we want.
Let's see, just one final question here.
Yes.
April first.
So I know that oftentimes when we talk to people who are defined to be transformational leaders, like yourself, and you talked a lot about education coming from your family, and that's where you got your passion. But when we talk to leaders, often they say, you know, there are multiple people throughout my life that really inspire me as far as the style and the way I like to lead. Who do you feel those people were?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, obviously it started with my father. My father was enlisted in the Navy, and I grew up, you know, underneath the car with him in the Chilton, you know, manual, working on the car and doing everything. And he just struck me as he knew a little bit about everything, right? He bought us a little Heathkit television, and you know that we were going to build together. And he was stationed on the aircraft carrier and disappeared for 6 months, so I built the TV by myself. But you know, just projects like that. He was always, you know, when I was a kid, he'd give me the dictionary and say, you know, read the page, and I'm going to quiz you on this page tomorrow. And like, Dad, nobody's reading the dictionary. nobody does this. And but now I look back at it, and it meant so much to me. And I think that, you know, that was the first. But then as I kind of moved along, and especially, you know, as my faith became more important to me, seeing people who were truly selfish have always motivated me. You know, people like Mother Teresa, and you know, I mean, like to me, like that's as good as it gets, right? We all have agendas, right? I'm playing in the NBA. I mean, I want to make more money. I want to do this, and I want to do that. I mean, it's hard for me to be totally selfless. I'm trying, but it's not. You know, that's not easy. But I see people like that, and I get inspired that I can do better. You know, and I keep pushing forward, and I try to inspire others, you know, as they come along as well. So Yeah, there's always that chain of people, and I think it's critical that you understand, not only that you have a long way to go, but you also got to take these other people with you as you grow.
Well, let's take a moment and thank David. This is just... For many, many reasons. For me, I suppose I have a physically advantage point because I keep looking out here on David's son, David Jr., who's sitting right here, and he and your children are perhaps the greatest testament to the truth and the power of everything that you have said. So just thank you so very much on behalf of
For
all
those
of
of you who know too much about us, I'm sorry. No, it's a blessing. I mean, my boys have been amazing, and you know, for the dad, that's the biggest joy, right? Watching them grow into young men. And for those of you at Notre Dame, you guys know Corey, and then my youngest is out there at Duke, and he's as a redshirt sophomore. I went back recently. I went to one of the exhibition games, and my son was sitting there with some of the new freshmen that had come in, and he was sitting. I think of my son as this young, little 19, 20-year-old kid, and he called one of the freshmen over and said, "Young fella, come over here." I thought, what in the world is happening here? But you see them become leaders. It's the greatest joy in your life that you see these boys. David's done a phenomenal job, and he's up in New York City, which you all know that's not an easy place to make your name. And he's up there doing a great job. So yeah, that's been a big joy for me.
Well, thank you again. We'll take a quick break, about 5 minutes, and we'll come back again. Thank you.